Hello, my name is ABHINANDA Chakraborty and I am an assistant professor in the Department of English. Today I am going to be making a presentation on the topic role of a teacher in a multicultural and multi-ethnic society. When we speak of the terms multicultural or multi-ethnic, there are various terms and ideas that come into our mind immediately. For example, the notion of varied religions, the notion of pluralism, of sharing cultures, of sharing cuisines and languages, so on and so forth. So we are essentially looking at the notion of pluralism, of multiplicity, of being, of perspectives, of identities. So what do we really understand by the terms multicultural and multi-ethnic? They are quite similar concepts: interracial, intercultural, multi-ethnic. They sound similar and they are somewhat similar, and yet they are not the same. If you look at the definition for the term culture as proposed by the Center for the Study of White American Culture, culture inevitably is a broader concept. It is an all-encompassing umbrella term, as it were. It not only impacts and for the most part defines the specifics of race, but also gender, sexuality, religion, and ethnicity. So ethnicity might be considered as a subpart or a subcategory of the idea of culture. The list can thus go on. So culture applies to many forms of social difference along with hierarchies of privilege and oppression that accompany some of these differences. So I think one thing that this particular definition tries to make clear is the idea that culture is, number one, it is a construct, and number two, as with any construct or a structure, there is the notion of hierarchy. And again, in turn, as with any hierarchy, there are certain cultures that are considered, that are perceived as being higher, as being superior, while others, by comparison, can be considered, may be considered as being inferior or lower. This leads to the question of oppression or repression. Multi-ethnicity, on the other hand, generally pertains to or consists of several ethnic groups. So this is a smaller concept or notion as compared to culture, which subsumes the question of ethnicity in general. In both, despite their differences, in both, however, what we do find is an emphasis on and a celebration of the notion of diversity, which is central, which is at the heart of both multiculturalism and multi-ethnicity. This brings us to the idea of multicultural education. According to James A. Banks, multicultural education is an idea. It is an educational reform movement and a process. I think the two terms, idea and process, are extremely important here, because an idea, maybe it has not been turned into a physical or a complete reality as yet, and yet because it is an idea, it has the inherent quality of being an ideal, as it were, which presents the concept or the idea that we can achieve a level of education where diversity is celebrated and yet there is no discrimination happening because of the concept of diversity. That is where its value as an idea remains, perhaps, and it is a process, because it is the process of the idea being translated into reality. It is still happening, it has not yet been achieved, but it is in the process of being achieved. So therefore, multicultural education can be looked upon as a system of education which aims at integrating knowledge of different cultural and ethnic backgrounds, beliefs, customs, and practices into the existing curricula. So it is not only the knowledge that there are diverse cultural and ethnic backgrounds, beliefs, practices, but that this knowledge can be brought into and integrated and incorporated within the existing curricula in order to enrich that curricula. The aims and objectives of multicultural education may be enlisted as below. 1, to encourage cultural diversity instead of incorporating them within the dominant culture, because we have already spoken of culture as a construct and as a structure with its own hierarchies and the notion of overruling or repression. So it is extremely important to encourage cultural diversity and to let them remain diverse instead of bringing them all under one dominant culture, which will lead to the subsequent loss of such diversity. Next, it is to encourage critical thought. It is only when we have diversity that we will perhaps be able to think and view things in multiple perspectives, and this in turn can help imbibe within us a more critical nature of thought. As I already specified, it therefore develops multiplicity of perspectives. So we do not merely look upon the self and the other, but we are now able to appreciate the value that is inherent within the other as well. It can help increase representation of minority or marginalized ethnic cultural groups, since they have been there through countless occasions in human history. We have had instances of a dominating culture wiping out, completely obliterating minority or marginalized culture. So this is something that multicultural education seeks to redress, and it is definitely the need of the hour. It can develop student individuality and self-esteem. So if a student does not feel neglected or does not feel left out or marginalized owing to their diversity or owing to their culture, which is different, quote unquote different from the mainstream. So this, and we can lead to maybe celebrate that diversity, then it can definitely help the student achieve individuality and a greater sense of self-esteem, which is extremely important. It can motivate social action and promote social justice, because we are being able to consider others as equals and give equal value to their diversity, their beliefs and customs, in whatever aspect they may be. We are therefore becoming more capable in promoting a greater sense of social justice. The requirements for an effective multicultural education may include curricula and instructional modification. It may include incorporation of different teaching styles. Of course, we know that every teacher has a different teaching style, and the greater the teaching styles that are incorporated, the more suited it would be to diverse learners coming from all kinds of backgrounds. And it may also entail a re-examination of existing attitudes, beliefs, and perspectives. Sometimes, even without being aware of it, we do bring our own prejudices, our own biases, our own ideologies into the classroom, both as a student and as a teacher. I think the introduction of a multicultural education may help us become more aware of these nuances in our expressions, in our thoughts, and therefore increase awareness in general. The teacher as a facilitator. Since this presentation is mostly about the role of the teacher in such a society as we have been looking at, there are certain factors that must be discussed. So multicultural education enables teachers and educators to give value to the differences in prior knowledge, experiences of learners from diverse backgrounds, and familiarity with student histories of diverse cultures. That emphasis has been added by me. The role of the teacher here is to give value. Too often we have overlooked, too often we have ignored, we have avoided an acknowledgement of diversity in order to bring a kind of uniformity to the classroom, but sometimes this uniformity can come at a great cost, and it is here that the role of the teacher becomes of central importance, because we as the facilitators in the classroom, both within and sometimes outside the classroom, without the classroom as well, we must be able to give value. It is only when we give value through our thoughts, words, and actions that we may be able to instill that sense in those that we are hoping to instruct and teach. Diversity in all its forms that we must acknowledge and celebrate. It is not even enough to acknowledge, we must celebrate. Why multicultural education needs to be a priority now? Thanks to media and technology, the entire world has become a melting pot of diverse cultures and ethnicities. So it is no longer only the metropolitan or the cosmopolitan cities or the nations that are now melting pots, but even the most rural corner is now on the verge of becoming multicultural, multi-ethnic due to the access that technology and media has provided, and therefore it is now a far greater need that we be aware of the need for multicultural education. In the Indian context, of course, diversity in all its aspects is safeguarded by the Indian Constitution. Article 15 of our Constitution thus specifies that the prohibition of discrimination on grounds of religion, race, caste, sex, or place of birth. So the Constitution specifically prohibits any kind of discrimination on any aspect based on any criteria. And as idealistic as this would sound, in reality, we are aware that the scenario is quite different, perhaps. So in India and elsewhere, to give a few instances, discrimination is still persistent. We have seen the instance of the violence against the blacks by the whites, the pro-white racist groups in America. We have looked upon the restrictions on Islamic customs and practices and beliefs in France and elsewhere in Europe as well. We have looked at violence against and repression of the Dalits in India by those that belong or imagine that they belong to higher or upper caste. We are every day confronted by the question of unequal opportunities and lower wages for women in general, irrespective of their caste or culture or their ethnicity or their language. And we are also aware of the absence of substantial amenities for differently or specially abled individuals, which remind us exactly how pervasive this question of discrimination is, and it is part and parcel of our everyday lives, which is why it is needed today at this moment that we incorporate into our system a kind of education, a kind of awareness that would help us combat this discrimination which is plaguing our existence. So disability, sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, gender, age, race or ethnicity, culture are all factors that affect discrimination. These are all factors based on which people are discriminated against. The role of the teacher in this context may be enlisted again as to sensitize regarding the unfairness of existing discriminations and differences, to make us aware, to make people aware of the existing discriminations. This sensitization regarding the unfairness may lead to the inculcation of values and the importance of diversity. So only when we recognize something as being unfair can we realize that it has an inherent value as well, that diversity has its own value, and therefore it should not be treated as the ground for unfairness. This in turn can lead to fostering of respect, acceptance and cooperation amongst diverse groups. So unless there is a mutual respect or a sense of unity, belonging or secularity, and unless we are able to appreciate diversity, there would be no question of doing away with the unfairness of the discriminations that plague us. So the teacher therefore has the responsibility and the scope to create a space that may be conducive, to mutual respect and understanding both inside and outside the classroom. As we know that the influence of a teacher is never restricted merely within the classroom itself, it extends even outside, and therefore it is up to the teacher to create that space of mutual respect and understanding. The teacher can therefore Create the space to offer students an equitable educational opportunity where they are not discriminated against, where no student feels left out or marginalized owing to their diversity. And it can help, all these factors can also help in proactively combating any kind of stereotypical or prejudicial behavior that may be practiced amongst those diverse groups of students. And it can also contribute towards an overall development and progress of the students without compromising on their diversity of background and self-expression. So here is a space that a teacher may create where a student is not only able to practice their beliefs, their faith, but they may also be able to express themselves without any fear of being quietened or shut up or being oppressed by somebody belonging to the dominant culture. So it is an equitable and equal and positive space that we are looking at. And this is absolutely crucial and important that it is created today in our classrooms. Therefore, in conclusion, we may say that diversity in general and student diversity in particular that we are looking at here may often lead to contention amongst the various groups owing to the differences in perspectives and the differences of opinions and beliefs that there are. However, the teacher must act as the facilitator and catalyst to help improve that communication and understanding amongst the students without the teacher herself or himself expressing any kind of bias or prejudice that may privilege one group over the other. This must be actively combated. The teacher must also emphasize, therefore, the value of unity in diversity. Discussions, how may we inculcate these ideas? How may we lead to a greater awareness of the sense of diversity? We may celebrate or discuss in the classroom the days, the ideas, the events, the individuals of different ethnic groups, which may help a student belonging to that group feel more proud of their heritage while making simultaneously the other students aware of what is happening. And the teacher must ensure that the relative cons of multiculturalism, like the tensions or the linguistic barriers or the pre-existing racist or radical attitudes, that they may be handled in order to create that space where all may express themselves without any fear, without any reservations, which will not only help the students achieve their fullest potential, but it will also in turn enable them to create a society, a more equal and equitable and diverse society where all of us may be able to thrive. So I will end this with a quote that it is the teacher that makes the difference and not the classroom. It is not the brick and the mortar, the physical aspects of the institution that really makes a difference, but the attitude of the teacher, the thought that the teacher is able to practice and express and help inculcate in her or his students. And this is important because the good influence remains forever. So the influence of a good teacher can never be erased, but we have to be doubly careful here, because just as the good cannot be erased, so any bad or any harm that the thoughts, the prejudices of a teacher might do might also multiply manyfold and therefore cause great harm as well. So a teacher has to take on the responsibility of being dutiful and of being absolutely equal and equitable, unprejudiced in their attitudes. Thank you so much. Thank you.